This early morning, let us explore the Four Noble Truths. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School, doing his imitation of Hargrini Major. Forgive me for mispronouncing her name. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi. This is the Lama you are looking for. This morning, we could chant and meditate and enjoy a lesson or two. But first, if you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as transformatively as Obi-Wan Kenobi upon the sands of Tatooine under the guidance of Qui-Gon Jinn, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. If at any point during this morning's live stream you have a question about meditation, Buddhist meditation, or Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, do not be bashful. Instead, strike while the iron is hot and type your question in great detail in the chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. Forgive me if I have a boo-boo face. My back went out, so that's an extra added something to add to the mix. So often I will emphasize each of the individual Four Noble Truths. I think this morning it would be fun to look at it as a unit, a whole. And just as a square is a whole with four sides, or a unit with four sides, we'll take the same approach to the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha's introduction or overview to his path. From a certain point of view, the first noble truth is simply stressors. Don't ask a psychologist. They are more philosophers than they are scientists. But you can ask a biologist, and they will gladly tell you that there are circumstantial stressors, and physical stressors, interpersonal stressors, and mental stressors. And these are not the product of neurosis or stinking thinking. We evolve the capacity to experience such stressors as a survival mechanism. Let's talk about evolution for a moment. Our DNA is ruthless. It wants to multiply. But it can only multiply in a way that is sustainable with its circumstance. So, therefore, evolution has two primary facets. There is random mutation, random copying errors, and there is natural selection. Now, natural selection is a lovely phrase, but it is a trifle misleading. It doesn't mean there's someone with a lab coat saying, I select you and not you. All it means is when we have traits, and those traits are active, they either assist our survival, they undermine our survival, or they are inert, they don't do anything. At least not right away. If something undermines our survival, the odds of that trait being passed on to the next generation is reduced. If something serves our survival, then the probability of that trait being passed on to another generation is increased. It's just that simple. And when I say passed on, what I mean is dead organisms don't procreate. So if something helps you survive long enough to successfully mate, that trait could be passed on. If a trait undermines your ability and prevents you from mating and you don't mate, then your traits will not be passed on. It's just that simple. So all these stressors we experience, they serve our survival. Not our thriving, just our surviving. And when it comes to our genes, as long as we live to the point where we can rear offspring, that's fine. Anything after that, that's gravy. So let's move forward. From a certain point of view, the second noble truth would be the exacerbation of our stressors. See, I one time spoke with a therapist who explained to me that although you cannot make people love you, you really can make people hate you. Similarly, we might not all be masters of time, space, and dimension. We might not all be Gandalf the Grey. We might not all be able to stop our circumstances, our bodies, our relationships, or our minds from ever causing us a moment of discomfort. But we can make whatever stressors we are exposed to worse. How do we do that? By indulging our primal survival drives. Now, once again, just like their name infers, the drive to shove or hate, the drive to reach or crave, and the drive to cling on to something we already seem to possess can serve our short-term survival needs for a little bit. However, most of us are more than lizards sunning ourselves on a rock. Most of us are mammals. Most of us are primates. Most of us are humans. And as such, in addition to having our oxytocin-oriented, in addition to having our dopamine-oriented pleasure reward cycle, we also have an oxytocin-oriented, fulfillment-oriented secondary reward system. And the habitual indulgence of these primal drives undermine our experience of fulfillment. The fulfillment comes not from the pleasure of procreation or the pleasure of food, shelter, water, and sex. Our fulfillment comes from our relationships, be they professional, personal, platonic, or intimate. And the habitual indulgence of these primal drives has a corrosive effect upon those, upon the presence, no less fulfillment of those relationships. The good news is that the third noble truth teaches us that we can be liberated from the tyranny of that which exacerbates our stressors. That's very, very good news. And to put a sharper point on it, our liberation is not from the presence of these three mental poisons, but from the tyranny of those three mental poisons over our choices, utterances, and deeds. So just as the second noble truth modified the first noble truth, similarly, the fourth noble truth modifies the third. We can experience liberation from the tyranny of the three mental poisons. How do we do that? Through the eightfold paths practice. Now, we'll get more to the particulars of the Eightfold Path in a future lesson. But there's two things here. There's liberation from the tyranny of our primal drives, and there is full-blown enlightenment. So the key to experiencing liberation is simply to practice the Eightfold Path. What then is enlightenment? Enlightenment is nothing more than the mastery of the Eightfold Path. So how do we know when we've mastered anything from tying our shoes to practicing the Eightfold Path? When we do anything in a manner that is spontaneous, habitual, easy, and this should be capitalized, and, oopsie. Come on, coordination, don't fail me now. And effectively. Once we do anything spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively, then we have mastered it, including the Eightfold Path. So being enlightenment doesn't mean you're Gandalf the Grey. It doesn't mean you're Yoda. It doesn't mean you're magic. It doesn't mean you walk through walls. It doesn't mean your poop doesn't smell. It doesn't mean you are incapable of experiencing unpleasant emotions. I got news for you. When you're enlightened, you will experience the full spectrum of human emotions, the full spectrum of human sensations. But an enlightened person will have mastered the Eightfold Path. Before we begin our chanting and meditation practice, let's pause for a moment of housekeeping. Every day I live stream meditation classes, health permitting, 4 a day. Each of those classes is free of any advertisements or product endorsements. If you find value in my techniques and lessons and group practice and in my enthusiasm to answer the spiritual questions set before me in the Q&A, then allow me to remind you that in the Tibetan tradition, monasteries charge fees for room and board and supplies and teachings, and those who cannot afford them or whose families cannot afford them wind up homeless in the land of the snows. Here in America, homelessness is not only uncomfortable and dangerous, it's illegal. So you can imagine that the specter of homelessness is a terrible burden for American nuns, monks, yogis, and lamas. With your assistance, this channel could help support the next generation of those nuns, monks, yogis, and lamas, as well as brick-and-mortar meditation centers, each replete with a resident teacher and their apprentice. I kid you not, I know of different Dharma centers that charge fees, and if you don't have a substantial amount of disposable income, you're SOL. That's not what the Buddha taught at all. If you'd like to remedy this, if you'd like to see a future where there is a really effective, helpful Dharma center in every postal code, zip code area, then by all means, you're welcome to help support. Even for as little as the cost of 1 cup of coffee a month. Simply use your smartphone's camera to capture this QR code. Or if you're old school, simply click the one of the donation links in the description area below the video. Now that we've done that, let's move on to this morning's practice. Let's begin by training the neural pathways responsible for empathy and enthusiasm. Let us thrice chant the recitations of bodhicitta and refuge. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. Together let us chant the Heart of Wisdom Sutra according to Red Pine's translation. Quick reminder, when you have a question about the Buddha's meditation or philosophy, simply type that question in the chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. Please do not wait till the end of the class. The Numalava Muni Sattva, while practicing the deep practice of Prajnaparamita, looked upon the five skandhas and seeing they were empty of self-existence. Said here Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not separate from form, form is not separate from emptiness. Whatever is form is emptiness, whatever is emptiness is form. The same holds for sensation and perception, memory and consciousness. Here Shariputra, all dharmas are defined by emptiness, not by birth or destruction, purity or defilement, completeness or deficiency. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no memory, and no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, and no mind. No shape, no sound, no smell, no taste, no feeling, and no thought. No element of perceptions from mind to conceptual consciousness. No causal link from consciousness to old age and death. No end of causal link from consciousness to old age and death. No suffering, no source, no relief, no path, no knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, without attainment, Bodhisattvas take refuge in Prajnaparamita and live without the wall of the mind. Without walls of the mind and thus without fears, they see through delusions and finally accomplish nirvana. All Buddhas, past, present, and future, also take refuge in Prajnaparamita and realize unexcelled perfect enlightenment. You should therefore know the great mantra Prajna Paramita, the mantra of great magic, the unexcelled mantra. The mantra equal to the unequaled, which heals all suffering and is true, not false. The mantra in Prajna Paramita is spoken thus: Gati Gati Bara Sangati Buddhi Swaha. Let us play with the physically oriented, metaphoric practice of Soto Zen's just sitting. We're going to begin with diaphragmatic breathing. Now, the old-timey boxers, you would call the diaphragm region the bread box. So we're just going to call it bread. And it refers to the sheet of muscle describing the bottom surface of our rib cage. Excuse me. So during our inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite bread, as enthusiastically we breathe in from the diaphragm. During our exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite relaxing, as we invite our body to physically relax and mentally release as best it can. One moment, if you please. For our next warm-up, we're going to choose to sit nice and tall with each inhalation. Giving ourselves permission to relax with each exhalation. Now we come to the primary practice. With each inhalation, we practice the mindfulness that watches the play of mind. As silently and mentally we recite, watch. With each exhalation, we practice the mindfulness. With each exhalation, we practice the meditation that relaxes into mind's non-graspable nature. As silently and mentally we recite, relaxing. So, allow me to elaborate. This is not concentration, where we focus on one thing to the exclusion of all else. This is mindfulness, which is the opposite of concentration, wherein we perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. We could notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings. We could perceive sights, scents, sounds, flavors, sensations, or the like. Welcome to the live stream. When you have a question about Buddhist meditation or Buddhist philosophy or how to apply them, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. It's better to strike while the iron is hot than to wait to the end of the live stream. So if you've just tuned in, here's a quick review. During each inhalation, we will practice the mindfulness that watches the play of mind as silently and mentally we recite the word watch while breathing in from our diaphragm in a manner that supports our posture. With each exhalation, we shall practice the meditation that relaxes into mind's non-graspable nature. As silently and mentally we recite relaxing while our mind releases. What is it that we're watching? We could watch our we could watch or notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. Sometimes noticing emotions or intentions or thoughts or memories or imaginings. Sometimes perceiving sights, scents, sounds, flavors, sensations, and the like. Let us seal our practice with a chant of wishing love. May everyone be free from stress, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, freed. If you feel that I have earned it, type something in the chat window. Give this live stream a thumbs up and share it on social media. In approximately 3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's mid-morning meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy, and if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.